Hello everybody and welcome to another Twilight Zone review. Today it is Season 5, Episode 17, Number 12 Looks Just Like You, written by John Tomerlin and starring Colin Wilcox as Marilyn, Susie Parker as various female characters, Richard Long as various male characters, and Pamela Austin as Valerie. This episode was based on a story by Charles Beaumont, who unfortunately was having health issues at the time. So John Tomerlin contributed the script for the Twilight Zone episode. And this is, I would say, one of the classic Twilight Zone episodes. It's certainly one of my favorites. And I think part of that is because it's both entertaining and thought-provoking, which also makes for an excellent episode. But also because this episode touches on a lot of things that are still very relevant today. So we start in a room with a girl named Marilyn and her mother, who I believe her name is Lana. And they're talking about choosing a number, and we're not sure what this means yet, although I think we can guess from the pictures on the wall. And we learn that number 12 is a very popular number, and it's the number that her mother has. And Marilyn seems unsure about this surgery that she's supposed to get. She's not really confident about it. And then a maid comes in, and the maid looks exactly like her mother. So that's an excellent setup for our episode. And after the opening narration, Marilyn is now talking to her uncle. And this guy looks just like every male character in the episode will look. And he comes in and talks to Marilyn. He's trying to reassure her, and mention of her father is brought up, who also looks just like her uncle. This will be relevant later. And Marilyn wonders if being the same as everyone else will be like being nobody, which is an interesting concept, because if everybody's the same, they obviously don't have their own identity. She talks about how she wants to have emotions and be able to feel something other than happy. So at this point, Marilyn talks to her friend Valerie, who's trying to convince her of how this surgery is. And this is an important scene because it shows us how someone would be after the transformation. Everyone would act kind of like how her friend Valerie acts here, just very happy all the time with no real troubles. An interesting thing to think about. So at this point, Marilyn's mother and everyone is concerned about her because they can't convince her she should get this surgery to look and think like everybody else, basically. So Marilyn is taken to this doctor, who again looks just like her uncle, and he learns that she doesn't want the transformation. He thinks this is disturbing and weird, so he takes some tests, and he concludes that she has some kind of resentment. We learn that Marilyn's father was reluctant to have this done, and he must have told her this. He told her things like it's tragic, and he must have just warned her about it. So the doctor tells her she has a good mind for thinking, and she should be able to fit right in. So Marilyn turns it around on him and says, well, if I have a good mind, then why can't you trust me to think for myself, which I thought was a good comeback, and it makes sense. But the doctor's having none of it. He says, we're going to make you the way you want you to be. We'll just have to fix that. So although it doesn't seem like it's mandatory to have this transformation, at least by law, it pretty much is mandatory because they're going to make you think that way eventually, which is kind of disturbing. Then we go to a scene in the episode I didn't care for too much. I thought it was a little over the top and a little long, but it certainly doesn't kill the episode in any way. And Marilyn sees this Professor Sigmund, and he's obviously a take on another famous character in history. That's all I'll say about that. I'll let you watch that for yourself. And he tells her a story, and apparently we find out more about this procedure. Apparently it also helps you to live longer. It cures a lot of things. He says you can live 2, maybe even 3 times as long, and it makes you stay looking younger a lot longer. He talks about how Marilyn's mother would already be looking a lot older, and she looks just how she always has. She looks great. Basically, he's trying to convince Marilyn of all these reasons why the procedure would be good. And then she comes back and talks about all these books she's been reading by very famous authors, a lot of philosophy and other classic stories of that nature. And we find out that these books she's been reading have been banned, so we can see what's really going on in this society. They basically use the change of looks, but they really change the way you think as well. Very disturbing. And eventually Marilyn's just not buying it, and she's taken off. So we cut to the next scene with Marilyn in a room awaiting the surgery, and her mother and Valerie come to see her. And Marilyn's very, very upset about this. She feels like she's going to be forced to do this, even though her mother tells her they would never do that. But I think we all know different. Then we get some more disturbing information as Valerie tells her, why are you always so worried about your father? Your father is gone. And we find out she's had like 9 other ones. We figured out that it's very common for people to get married like 9, 10, 11 times in this society. Marilyn doesn't want to hear this. She talks about how she loves her father, and she really lets Valerie have it in a good scene. She really yells at her. And then Marilyn says that her father did himself in basically because he couldn't handle the transformation. So now we find out what really happened, but Valerie doesn't respond to this at all. She just feels happy and good. This might be the most disturbing scene in the whole episode because the reaction is just of no sympathy for Marilyn at all. I thought this was very well done and very, very disturbing. So at this point, Marilyn tries to escape. She's still trying to resist this. And this is a very creepy, well done scene as she's out in the halls of the place, hospital, or whatever kind of place it is. But eventually she walks into the wrong room, and it's the operating room. And she winds up there, and we get one last scene, and we know what's going to happen, I think, at this point. Her mother and Valerie are waiting to see her. They're concerned because they haven't seen her in a couple days, and the doctor comes out and says that's okay. It takes some people a few days to adjust, but we took care of it. And when Marilyn comes out, we find out she chose number 8 and that she looks just like her friend Valerie. So in my opinion, this is a classic Twilight Zone episode that is somewhat disturbing and definitely has themes that are still relevant. This is one of those examples of why people still hold Twilight Zone in very high regard today. And overall, I give number 12 Looks Just Like You a 4.5 out of 5. Definitely a classic must-see episode in my opinion. So a 4.5 out of 5 for number 12 Looks Just Like You. And as always, thank you very much for watching.